We will get started then and call this meeting to order. First thing on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm going to do the roll call.
Yes, please.
Jennifer Ashburn, she called off. Marianne Baxter,
Here.
Abby Bemis,
Here.
Diane Corso,
Here.
Adriana Guerra,
Here.
Billy Hill,
Here.
David Miller,
Here.
Mark Pfeiffer, Tim Schwanger,
Here.
Elizabeth Semler,
Here. Tom
Tom Shara,
Here.
Jennifer Torres,
Here.
Lavada Wilson,
Here.
Mike Zula,
Here.
Good. So our first item of business, as requested at our last meeting, we would invite Mr. Hastings to give us a presentation, a little bit of history lesson on former measures from this committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Yes, we prepared this very large thing you see in front of you, which has all the charter proposals since 2015. They come from different sources. Some have come from petitions, which is one way to get a charter provision on the ballot. Some have come from the charter review process, which is what we're doing right now. And some have come from the commission itself. The commission has the power to put something on the ballot with a supermajority vote at any time. So I'll just go through. One thing I'll point out is we had a format where this worked perfectly. I don't know why the last printing didn't work as well as the first, but we didn't want to waste this very large, expensive paper. So the year it should be higher. So you see the 2022, that applies to Section 25 expenditures. So if you just push the year up in your viewing, the year and the result appear on the same level. So that was a petition to amend the charter to require a vote of the electors of the city on the sale of certain kinds of, I guess, park property. That failed. You see the percentages there, 67% to 33%. The next one on the line is the 2021, also by petition, was a charter amendment to change the number of at-large commission seats from 7 to 3, and then have 4 wards in the city. I should mention that the default under the Ohio Revised Code for a city our size is wards. The city of Cleveland, for example, has all their council members elected through the ward process. Beechwood, which is also large enough to have wards elected to do it all at large, like the city of Sandusky does. And certainly that's within our power to do that. This was a proposal to change that, to have 3 at large and 4 wards in the city. That failed 68% to 32%. All right, the next 7 on your list here were all a result of the Charter Review Committee in 2020. The first one was to change the requirement to publishing legislature in the newspaper by title only and adding a requirement to provide online notification and posting in public places as designated by the City Commission. That one, although it was recommended by the Charter Review Committee, was not passed by the City Commission. This is a 2-part process. First, this commission has to recommend to the City Commission what charter changes you would like to see, and then the City Commission will take that up and decide yay or no, or I suppose could add one of their own if they want. That one they chose not to take up. That's why there's no vote. The next one is the salary and bonds for commissioner pay to increase the salary of a city commissioner Oh, and by the way, the red ones are the ones that didn't pass, the green ones are the ones that did pass. So that's our color-coded system. The charter amendment was to increase the salary for a city commissioner to qualify for the minimum public employee retirement system payment. That passed 47% to 53%. The next one was qualifications, changed the required residency for city commission candidates from 3 years to 18 months. That failed 60% to 40%. The next one, expenditures, raised the threshold for competitive bidding to $50,000 and raised the threshold for expenditures requiring legislation to $50,000. That failed 57% to 43%. I suspect that will be a topic for our discussion as well. It's currently at $10,000. For competitive, just to make a pre-argument here, for competitive bidding, it's getting to the point where to competitively bid a $10,000 project is going to cost you more to competitively bid it than it will cost to do it. The next one is the civil service police chief requirement. That was to actually expand, I believe, I wasn't here, but I believe that was to expand the persons eligible to be the police chief, and that passed 70% to 30%. The next one is fire chief, similar provisions, and that one passed 75% to 25%. The last one from the 2020 process was it's complicated reading, but what it basically amended was that if a commission member was appointed to a term of less than 2 years, it did not count towards the maximum that they were allowed to serve. Our charter has the commission members are only allowed to serve for 12 years in a row out of 16 years. I suppose after 16 years, they could start the process again, but.
If I could just add that went from 8 to 12, so it was 8 years that they were eligible to serve. When they passed that, it went to 12 years, and then the 2 year if they were appointed to a term outside of that. So that's what that amendment was for.
Yeah, that one was originated by the city commission without a charter review committee. And that one passed, I think I already said that. So, and you can see the numbers there. 2015, that was 2016. 2015, that was a charter review committee prior to the 2020 charter review committee. They only proposed 2 charter review amendments. One had to do with the law director. The law director would be appointed by and serve at the pleasure of the city manager, as opposed to appointed by the city commission. And the finance director also would be appointed by and serve under the supervision of the city manager rather than the city commission. Both of those passed. The law director 63 to 37, and the finance director 59 to 41, which I always remind Michelle about. So, and that's my report on the charter amendments and the last 2 processes.
Any questions for Mr. Hastings? Okay, hearing none. The other thing I asked Stuart to give us a little bit of a primer on was, for those of you and myself who've been out of this field for a little while, a reminder on Robert's Rules of Orders and what we should abide by during our meeting today.
Sure. I prepared a really short, I hope really short presentation. This is not presentation 1 of 500. The purpose of Robert Rules, or the parliamentary procedure, is to make it easier for people to work together even when they disagree. It's to provide for an orderly process by which this group can make its decisions. It stems from hundreds of years of parliamentary rules in England. And in 1870s, a General Robert decided to write these down and create his own book called Robert's Rules of Order. I have here, this is the 11th edition, which we used to use. It's over 600 pages. We currently use the 12th edition, which is, well, I keep it in my iPad. It's on my Kindle. It's over 1,000 pages.
Excellent.
so-
But you'll give us the clip notes.
Yeah, it's very detailed. It's meant to apply to all sorts of parliamentary bodies and to help people get along. I guess and then finally, there's Sandusky has its own, fortunately, 8-page sort of overlay on Robert's Rules. Robert's Rules are not a statute. They're not the first thing this does is incorporate the latest version of Robert's Rules of Order into what the commission does. And that would apply to this body as well. Sandusky Rules of Order do make a couple of changes, which they are allowed to do. But the most important thing that I noticed in our first meeting is the role of the chair. Everything needs to go through the chair, with one exception, which we made. But the chair is in charge of the meeting. The chair publishes the agenda, which the chair has control over. Now, that doesn't mean that if something that you want to talk about is not on the agenda, that doesn't mean you can't talk about it. There's a section on the agenda for new business. That is the appropriate time for you to make a motion, see if you get a second, and then you can discuss if there's something you wanted to talk about that wasn't already on the agenda. The chair is required to keep the meeting orderly and civil. Each member has a right to speak, but before you can speak, you first must be recognized by the chair. This is particularly important of a body of this size because like 4 or 5 of you may all want to speak at once. So raise your hand or say, Madam Chair. And when you are recognized, when she says Mr. or Ms. So-and-so, then it's now your turn to speak. Under our rules of order, which is actually similar to the House of Representatives of the United States, there's no filibuster. Everyone is limited to 5 minutes. It's actually my job to time everybody. I won't start doing it unless I sense that we're approaching that limit. If someone wants an additional 5 minutes, someone can make a motion in a second and vote to give a person an additional 5 minutes to speak. That's what our rules provide. And I think there's a lot you can say in 5 minutes on any one particular topic. 9.01C, this is an important one. A person may speak a second time on a particular matter, but only after everyone else has had a chance to speak. In other words, and that's up to the chair to enforce. If, without pointing anyone out, if somebody wants to talk about something and then somebody else says something and you want to respond to that, you have to wait your turn until other people have had a chance to respond to that very thing. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Our one modification is that Sandusky Rule 2.02, you don't have to say through the chair anymore. It used to be if you're questioning me or questioning Michelle, you don't have to, every time you can have a direct conversation. But the chair is still in control of the meeting. And if the chair feels that it's necessary to keep order, the chair is entitled to interrupt and stop what's going on. Under Rule Point 203, I am the parliamentarian. The law director is the parliamentarian for the body. I am relatively familiar with the Robert's Rules. I won't claim to have memorized them. But I will say if you have trouble sleeping at night, great thing to pick up. But Rule 2.02, I'm in advisory capacity. The chair's decision on the rule is final, is what it says. You don't get to overrule the chair even by a majority vote, which is what's in Robert's rules. But in the Sandusky rules, the chair's ruling is final on a matter of parliamentary procedure. And I'll end there. There are so many more things to talk about, but I think that'll get us started.
Thank you. Very good. So our first agenda item is public comment. We did add this to the agenda and made a decision to put this at the beginning of our discussion so that we could hear from residents in the audience before we might get into any relevant topics. There's an outline of what we intend to get to today. So with that, I would invite any members of the public to the podium. We did use the city's 3-minute time limit to guard our meeting as well. Very good. So moving on to today's discussion, for those of us attending online, I did just want to comment first that the city's charter is available on the website for Kathy at cityofsandusky.com/charter review. I say that because we will not read each section of the charter in detail. It is here present in front of each of the committee members. So our goal today is to establish which items of the charter we'd like to revisit and discuss in more detail, and really cross off those that we know we aren't going to want to initiate any changes to. So we have a long list, just with the number of meetings that we've outlined. I think our goal needs to be getting through items 1 through 16, but if we have time to get into the next section of the charter, we can do so. So with that, we will get started. Again, I think we just tackled this one by one, and I'm looking for members to identify areas of the charter that they need additional clarification or that they anticipate that they would like to see a change made to. We don't need to debate everything today, but essentially get our slate on the table for further discussion. So I will start with item 1, name and powers. Item A.
Through you, Madam Chair. Before item A, there's the "we, the people of the city of Sandusky." I got lost in the very first sentence. I'm a little chagrined that Almighty God is held by all in Sandusky to be the grantor of our freedoms and such. I mean, I allow for atheists and agnostics and people of other religions that have, other than possibly that might refer to the Judeo-Christian God, but when it gets to our freedom to secure its blessing, I'm lost about if it is modifying the city of Sandusky or Almighty God in a gender-neutral way. If that's the case, then it's inconsistent with the subsequent gender section we'll get to, but I wondered if there's some clarification, if that's some anachronistic thing that's always been there and no charter review ever talks about God, or its blessings being the city or God's, or, oh.
Any further comment on that?
Yeah, Madam Chair. Is that something we want to talk about further?
Well,
as we-
and not necessarily, I just was curious in Mr. Hastings' interpretation of the plain English involved. What does its modify, and is God really what we're talking about here, as being a he or she or an it?
Yeah, using my grammar hat, it would refer to the next previous proper noun, but I don't think it would be Almighty God. It would be Sandusky, Ohio.
I mean,
Mr. Miller?
I don't hold myself to be an intelligent person, but I think I would give myself average intelligence, and if I can't read it and make sense of it, maybe there's others like me that find it to be ambiguous or not clear. But I can move on. I just make that note.
I think there were several sections, of course, of the charter that you can tell were written over the last hundreds of years of the city. That might be one of them. Looks like updated in '89. However, I mean, I assume that there might be other items that we want to present for actual change to the commission. Any others that would like to revisit this particular section of the charter for further discussion?
The names and powers section, Chair.
The very first paragraph, yes, prior to. Okay. Hearing none, we may live with the current writing. Moving on, Section 1, names and powers of this city. Any points of this that members felt change might be required?
Chair.
Yes.
Under the gender, designate both sexes, and whereas the male gender is used, it shall be deemed to include both male and female counterparts. I'm wondering if that's excluding some of the LGBTQ community that is non-binary and isn't necessarily consider themselves gender, and maybe a simple would be all sexes, all genders.
And maybe even more, just all citizens. I don't know that we need to designate a sex.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Zullo.
it's awkward there because it's a tradition of the language, at least, when I was growing up, that male, or the male pronoun could mean either gender neutral or specific, right? So, and shouldn't have been that way, but that's the solution we had is when the context suggested that it wasn't just men, that it was both men and women, so it could also be taken to be anyone. It wouldn't be hard to change the wording slightly to say that when we say that gender neutrality is intended, rather than trying to name every possibility in this age of pronouns. So, and I'm not deriding it. I'm neutral on that. I'm just or trying to be neutral at this moment. We can talk about it privately if you want. So if you simply said that it's intended to be gender neutral or sex neutral, whatever the better legal term is, I like gender better, but they both have subtly different meanings. That would be a solution without getting into the weeds.
Madam Chair, I do have a question, just for the whole process. So any proposed change that we make has to go to the ballot, correct? So if we would want to change the paragraph or the phrasing of "we the people" or the gender to gender neutral, it has to go to the ballot. Is that correct?
First, it would have to go
To the commissioners and then to the ballot. Is there a cost on putting something on the ballot? Is it per section, or is it?
There is a cost of putting things on the ballot, though once you have something on the ballot, it doesn't
It's the
cost
same
much
price,
more to
okay.
put another thing, unless and we haven't gotten there yet, but one of the things you'll recommend is we can do things two different ways. We can put individual suggested charter changes on the ballot, as we have done in the past, or it's possible to say, the Charter Commission and the City Commission have recommended 5 changes to the ballot. Here they are. Vote
Thank you.
yes or no on all 5. That's another way it can be done. But that'll be up to the City Commission as to how, but it's up to you to recommend. And then, the only thing I'll say about that is it will require careful drafting in these highly charged pronoun times.
Absolutely.
And we have a lot of federal funding in this city, and federal funding has been used as a threat very recently.
Madam Chair, I agree with what Mr. Hastings said. With the direction that we see our Commander-in-Chief going in at the current time, well, I think that the best way to handle this is try to come up with some form of neutral terminology due to federal funding. Because the direction that he is actually going in is actually cutting off federal funding if we're going to put the city in a position to where we are actually showing that we are, in a sense, showing favoritism to a particular group of people that our government is against. And it can cost us if you're really keeping up with what's going on right now. I don't agree with what's going on as far as within our Commander-in-Chief and his direction as far as how he's making decisions, but he is actually making decisions in that direction. My personal belief is that this country was founded off of the term God, in God we trust and everything else, and it was man and woman. But in this day and age, next week, next year, it could be a totally different term, something totally different coming up again. So the only way I think that we can correct that so we don't have to come across that again is coming up with a neutral term.
What I'm hearing is that there's interest in at least revisiting this section of the charter for further discussion and evaluating whether it is worth making the change or not. So,
If I could note, you may want to look at last charter's minutes, because this was something they heavily discussed as well. May give you a little for.
any comments regarding section 1C, compliance with open meeting laws? Very good. So anticipating no recommendation for change on section 1C. Moving into form of government, section 2. Mr. Schwanner.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to put this under future discussion at a later time. I'd like to revisit the idea of the ward system, just the ward system only.
Are there other members of the committee that want to see this topic revisited?
I would like to see that revisited as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Okay. I think that's probably all we need for now. I do anticipate it's been a frequent debate, it looks like, for the city at large, so that will be on a future agenda. Section 3, City Commission Creation and Powers. Are we comfortable with current term limits? Mr. Hastings, I had a question on this section. My understanding, so a city commissioner can serve 12 years of 16 years consecutively, exception for the appointments. They could then take a break and run again for city commission?
That's how I would interpret it, yes.
Okay. Seems as though this would not be a section we're looking to revisit for change. Okay. Section 4, qualifications.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may, Mr. Schwanger had a concern about the ward system, and I think it's under the City Commission creation and powers, not under the form of government. Form of government's City Commission and manager form of government. The at-large is under number 3. So if you're
Thank
back
you.
to it, I just want to make sure you're clear.
Yeah, we would have to change both.
Okay. Yeah, because, sorry, Madam Chair. Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, because Section 2 does mention 7 citizens who shall be elected at large. So you're saying we would need to change both of them? Okay.
Section 2 and Section 4. Or sec,
3 and
3. 2 and 2. Right, 2 and
2 and
3.
3.
2 and 3. Thank you. Currently discussing Section 4 and whether there's an interest in revisiting any section of this. As noted in the last charter review, they discussed the length of time that a resident needed to be in the city before being eligible for office. Personally, I feel comfortable with the 3, but I'd like to point that out for each. Okay. Continuing on then, Section 5, vacancies.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Swan.
I'd like to, at a future date, discuss the process of selecting a vacancy. Under the language we have here is that they would only go, if there's a vacancy, they would go to the next highest person that had the highest number of votes. And then thereafter, it's kind of silent. Just for discussion, my opinion would be that they would follow right on down through the last election. If there were 3 people that did not get elected, they would go to the first one. If they said no, then they'd go to the second one and the third one. And then after that, they would go to the Civil Service Commission to fill that spot. So I'd like to discuss that further at a later date.
Well, Mr. Schwank, Madam Chair, I don't believe that is what it says. If the first person, next highest, does not accept the appointment, then you go to the Civil Service Commission.
Right now, I would like to change that to where they would actually go to the second highest. The third
I see.
highest.
I didn't understand what you're saying.
Yes, and then
Okay.
go to the Civil Service Commission to fill that vacancy. If nobody that lost in the election does not want to fill the vacancy, then it would go to the Civil Service Commission.
Okay. We'll add that to the agenda. Section 6, salary and bonds. Also a section that was revised with the last charter committee. I would say kudos to the drafting of the last change to be able to keep up with current market. And
Absolutely.
it certainly makes it so that we don't feel compelled to need to make revisions every 5 years. Very good. Seeing head nods, we feel comfortable with that section. Section 7, the President of the City Commission.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask some help of the the law department, I could have sworn it wasn't long ago that I read the term ex officio mayor. Is that still here somewhere? Where?
Yes.
Where? I can't find it. I swear I read it and I can't find it.
The second paragraph, where she may use the title of mayor. I'll have all the administrative functions of a mayor and have the judicial functions in case we ever have a mayor's court, which we're allowed to have.
Right.
And then I think somewhere in here, you can declare an emergency and take over the police department.
The words I'm looking for are ex officio, which I know appears somewhere in our code and always did, and I'm kind of flummoxed because now I don't remember where it was.
Yeah, there are a lot of ordinances I've read. Like just this afternoon, I sat on the Economic Development Incentive Committee, and I'm an ex officio member of that by ordinance. I think that's
Right.
where we use that term.
So it doesn't appear in the
Here, no,
chart
it
at
just
all.
describes his power and describes him as the
All right.
title of mayor.
Well, coming back, the reason I brought it up is because over the course, as long as I've lived here and probably before, there's been confusion on the title of mayor, and the newspaper and everyone else kind of obsessively insists on referring to the mayor as the ex officio mayor, not just the mayor, even though it's clear that the intent of the charter is that the mayor may act in the capacity of and use the title of mayor. The trouble is that it appears all over the place capitalized, ex officio mayor, as though it's part of the title, when I think the intent was that it be mayor ex officio not capitalized, or ex officio mayor not capitalized, except mayor would be capitalized. It wasn't intended to be part of the title. It was intended to describe the nature of the office, right? So, but people don't understand even what ex officio means, so they just use it. So my suggestion would be to ensconce in this paragraph the term ex officio and make sure it's not capitalized so that we can dispense with that silliness. Now, I wouldn't want this to be the only thing that went, went forward, but I certainly would love it to have it on the list because it's one of those little housekeeping things we have a chance to do. And if we do, we won't have to worry about that silliness anymore, and maybe, it won't happen. But if we have a laundry list of other things that are more important, I would love to see this as a laundry list little thing, to just use the term, find a way to incorporate ex officio, not in caps here, so that it's more clear that it's a description of the office, not part of the title.
Mr. Hastings, when this is eventually brought to the ballot, is it possible to do a combination of the two options that you outlined where multiple changes,
Yes.
such as small language
Yeah, you
changes,
could
would be in
group
one?
a bunch of small language changes in various charter provisions in one ballot initiative, if that's the way the commission chooses to do it and the way you recommend to do it.
Madam Chair, if I may ask Mr. Hastings, that term alone, how does that affect our citizens having it and not having it?
I mean, the ex officio?
Yes.
Yeah,
what
that
is it?
sounds like a term that the newspaper uses, and I'm not sure.
Right, so
Yeah, I'm not sure that our charter can influence how they write their articles. If it can, then maybe we have a lot of things.
No, I wasn't referring to, no, I'm not referring to, if it's not in any legal form, but you just said you read it somewhere in our legal form, correct? Or what you read?
We have various ordinances. I don't know that it applies to the president of the commission. We have the term ex officio in a number of our ordinances.
So what I'm asking is, how does that affect us as citizens having it and not having it. So getting rid of it would do
I
what?
don't know that the term affects citizens. I mean, that's something you're going to have to judge. It's Latin, which means he has the office by reason of his position.
So getting rid of, so say legally then. So I'm asking.
Legally, the only worry I have is that our charter does a good job of defining exactly what the mayor can and cannot do. I'm not sure if ex officio adds anything to that. And if it does, I would be a little concerned.
Okay, that's exactly what I was looking for.
Madam Chair, may I ask for a clarification regarding it'd be the second to last paragraph, where it talks about the president of the city commission being able to enter into, basically proclaim an emergency, and then proclaim that emergency. It appears that they're able to proclaim that emergency, and then the commission determines whether or not they're going to support that emergency. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, he may do so. Again, I don't want to wish anything on Sandusky, but some emergency happens, and we need to work immediately.
Would there
The
be,
president of the commission can declare an emergency, and if he wants to, can take over the police department to instruct them on what they should do in this emergency. The rest of the commission, the way this reads, can overrule him next time they meet by 4 votes.
would there be a reason legally why potentially the city manager wouldn't be involved in that process, or why that would be silent in this?
Our charter is silent as to the city manager's role.
That was noticeable to me as well.
Madam Chair, I would ask for that area to be put on the list for consideration and discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Corson. Okay.
If I could
Mr.
follow up on this paragraph and what I brought up before, if nobody else has any.
Other comment before returning to Mr. Zulab? Okay.
Yeah. To the point of, how does this affect the citizens? It's subtle. It's not my OCD. Although there's plenty of that. It's that it introduces a little bit of confusion, and I like everything to be clear, and I want people to understand what's going on and not feel mystified by it or intimidated by it. So I think it adds clarity, maybe a little bit of learning. If you ask what the heck does ex officio mean, you can look it up in the dictionary or look it up online. But when it's capitalized, that's a source of confusion that there is no answer to other than fixing it. So I think you raised a good point. How does this affect the people of Sandusky? It's subtle, but I think it's little things count.
Okay. Hearing enough interest to revisit that at a future discussion. Moving on to Section 8, municipal bonds. And Michelle, I would just comment, I know there's a number of things related to the financial operation of the city. Please feel free to jump in if there's things that you observe and have experienced.
Will do.
Okay. No anticipated changes there. Section 9, clerk and employees. Very good. No anticipated changes there. Congratulations, Kathy. Section 10, meetings. No anticipated changes there. Section 11, penalty for absence.
Doris, did you have?
Oh, sorry. Pulling my hair out of my face.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Schwank?
I have a question. I know that in the past, maybe 25 years ago, there was a city commissioner that was also in the military reserves, and he missed quite a few meetings. How does the city commission enforce this? I mean, do they have to have a legitimate excuse, or can they just call the president and say, hey, I'm not going to be there tonight, and it doesn't, it's kind of a,
The legitimacy of the excuse is up to the city. You may have noticed when a member's missing, there's a motion to excuse. No reason given in the motion,
okay,
and I've yet to see the commission vote that down.
okay. So it's kind of just a parliamentary type thing where they have to do that. Okay.
So
Ms. Chair.
at each meeting, people are excused, and it's not counting towards this attendance policy.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, they do it, actually, the way we do it is every single time, they don't wait for the third time or whatever. And this is a useful provision in a charter if someone purposefully stops attending meetings. And it's a way for the charter to, get rid of them.
Okay.
Hearing no suggested changes. Section 12, legislative procedure. I could use a legal interpretation on this section.
Right, but, well, this, I'm glad you asked. This is an interesting one. This deviates, and we're allowed to deviate from Robert's rules. This deviates from Robert's rules. Robert's rules would say that to pass a motion, you need a majority of a quorum. So if, for example, we only had 5 members show up to a commission meeting, 3 members would constitute a majority, and they could vote in an ordinance 3-2. What this charter provision says that no, every ordinance or resolution must have at least 4 votes.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, having given that some consideration, and it's been discussed among prior commissions over the years. And the reason it works is because, yeah, exactly that. You don't want 3 people to pass an ordinance from on a board of 7. The thing about Robert's Rules of Order that hasn't been brought up is that historically it's really mostly thinking about much larger assemblies, maybe even a room full of people. Ms. Chairman, I rise to make the following point. Well, they literally mean rise. I mean, you'd be all sitting in a room and somebody would stand up. That's how they ask to be recognized, right? I mean, am I right? It's in the Rules of Orders. To rise.
Well, as I indicated in my first presentation, this resulted from hundreds of years' experience
Sure.
in Parliament, which is a very large body.
So
Although Mr. Roberts intended this to be for small bodies as well.
I don't doubt that, but the point being that obviously this trumps Robert's Rules of Order regardless of what the sidebar here. I don't know the rules. Is that legislation or simply a set of rules that the City Commission adopted?
The Roberts Rules?
No, the book of rules, the 8 pages that you showed us.
Yeah, this is something the City Commission.
They adopted. It's not legislation.
It was adopted by resolution.
By resolution, right? And does it explicitly bind all bodies, or is it simply mention the City Commission?
Are you talking about the charter provision?
No, I'm talking about the rules that
Yeah, the rules refer to the City Commission.
City Commission, okay.
I would be reluctant to advise any board or commission in Sandusky to deviate from what the commission likes for its rules.
Well, that would be great to make that explicit too, because it does come up in other boards and commissions. In fact, where we've landed, I recall several times, is we've got a quorum of 3 or 4, and 3 to 1 or 3 to 2 passes it, right? And it's been raised, the question is raised, well, no, you can't do that. And the answer was, that we got in prior years, was, it doesn't apply. With Robert's rules, we're using Robert's rules here, and that set of rules does not explicitly include other bodies, only the city commission, just like being excused or.
Well, the charter refers only to the city commission. It's very clear on that.
Right.
The rules of order also apply to the city commission, but don't limit it. But if you look at our ordinances, and this also helps in the interpretation of that too.
Right.
When they set up the various boards and commissions, some of them they're silent on, and some of them they specifically state there must be 3 votes to approve.
Yes, right. 3 or 4.
Well, it depends on how many there are, but.
Well, sure. Right.
But it would be a majority. I'm thinking of the Board of Zoning Appeals, for example, has a specific number in there that
Yes.
must pass no matter, even if you have a quorum present, you still need a majority of the total number to pass a resolution in the Board of Zoning Appeals. But
Right.
other boards and commissions in Sandusky do not have that specific
Right.
rule.
So I don't have any intent.
Bringing this back to the charter, are you suggesting that you'd like to see a change made to the charter to include additional committees? And I don't even know if is that possible?
Oh, yeah,
All
that's
right.
possible.
So I'm not arguing it either way. I'm just saying, what I'm sharing is the issues that have come up in the past, that it's raised questions, and I don't know if this is the best place to clarify that or not. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's best done with legislation, or maybe it's just best done by convention, but it seemed pertinent.
Yeah, again, going back to my original presentation, this is not something I would like to see in a charter. I think legislation is the better place for it. Legislation can be changed. Some of our boards and commissions, we have a hard time getting a quorum.
Well, then
People to
I'd-
show up.
Then I'd move that we.
And if then we need a unanimous vote every time we need to pass something, then that hog ties the city.
Well, let's recommend to take it out, or at least discuss it. Just lose it.
This
Well-
section?
Yeah, we haven't had that problem, at least and I don't have that one here, but the commission members tend to show up.
Well, and I mean, the way I understand this reading is if there is an attendance issue, this phrase compelled
Yeah,
to
in the
attend.
previous one, they would go and
They
then
are
we'd
built in to be able to address the
we'd be
problem at
able
a
to
commission
replace
level.
them. Correct.
Well, it may be a solution looking for a problem, but I don't know.
Madam, can I?
Mr. Schwann?
Please. There is a section coming up that has to do with advisory boards, commissions, and committees, if that's what we're concerned about, not necessarily the city commission, but if we're concerned about, boards and such, we can discuss your idea at that time. I mean, are we pretty good with this section, though, as far as it pertains to the city commission?
Any further comment from committee members? Mr. Miller?
Not that I think it's worthy of a change unless we're discussing this and electing to change. I personally think yeas and nays are anachronistic. When we voted yes and no, and just a simple plain reading of it. I don't think we have to go to 800 years of parliamentary history to record yeas and nays if the question is a yes or no question. When we vote yes and we vote no. We don't vote yay and nay typically, in my experience here. I wouldn't bring it up unless we were changing that anyway.
Okay.
I'm not hearing a ton of interest in revisiting this one at a later meeting. Okay. Moving on to section 13, ordinance enactment.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Schwager?
I'd like to hold this for a later meeting. There's always, for the last 20 years out in the community, has been discussion about regular ordinance enactment and emergency measures, which is the next section, which I'll get to when it comes. But it's always been a issue of contention on the way we pass ordinances and the sale of, different items. So if we can discuss this later, if possible.
Additional interest in the structure of Section 13 and 14?
Well, Madam Chairman, I would agree that I've heard numerous times over the years that for the city of Sandusky, everything seems to be an emergency, so it can be expedited. I'm not saying I need to change that, but it is a common complaint.
Let's plan on both 13 and 14 because they seem connected then as a section for further discussion. So that brings us to Section 15, Record and Publication.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Zulow.
Yeah, this is, over the years, I just remember it coming up over and over again. And every time it's discussed, and I'm not talking about just in charter review, it's in a different technological environment, right? So 25 years ago, it was an environment when newspapers were kind of going out of business, and pretty soon they had a monopoly, and they, some people thought they were charging too much for the ads. Then it became like, hey, why do we really need this when we have all the alternatives? So it's probably something that deserves to be thought about at least every time. What's the best way to do this? I mean, you could be saying you've got to put it in the newspaper and find I hope not, because I love our town newspaper, but you could find yourself without one, without a print newspaper. It's happened in other towns, So now what do you do, right? So we need to give it some thought.
If I may add, we do not publish in the newspaper. We publish on our website. And I must do that the day after commission meetings. So if anyone questions something that passed last night's meeting, it's all on the website today. You see every bit of legislation that passed. It is signed by the clerk and the commission president, and it is numbered.
Right, we have a really well-oiled administration right now. We're blessed with that. Okay. What if Attila the Hun somehow manages to install himself as city manager, and he says, I don't want people to know what's going on, and no, stop doing that, right? So we probably ought to ensconce something in the charter, to make sure that we're doing what makes sense, at least for the next 5 years.
It does. It says you have to publish it within 10 days.
Yeah.
Right, what I'm saying is, I'm just asking that we think about what's the environment can be, and maybe it's fine. I'm just saying, I'm inviting people to think about, what it says, and is it still, this was decided, most recently, it was reviewed 5 years ago, I presume, right? So, could it stand improvement? I don't know. I just asking that everyone give it some thought, that's all.
Mr. Schwager?
Kathy, what do we put in the newspaper now? Anything like public notices or?
Anything that is a charter change has got to be printed in the newspaper within 10 days.
Okay.
Is a charter change, a piece of legislation that is changing something or a codified ordinance, it has to be printed in the paper. But it still has to be on our website as
Okay.
well. But all regular legislation is only going on the website. It's not printed in the paper, and it never was always printed in the paper.
It never was what?
Always printed in the paper. Only charter changes or codified ordinances. Changes.
Yeah, I'm right.
Yeah.
Right. Including, though, like contracts and stuff, right?
I don't print contracts.
You had to publish bids.
I don't
Once upon a
do that
time.
as the clerk. That would be to each department.
Sure, right.
Oh, okay,
The commission clerk, I wouldn't do that job.
okay.
Again, I'm not proposing anything specific. I'm just saying, let's keep up with technology, and maybe we don't have to do anything.
Sounds like, and with a focus on section 16, really, then the mode of publication that we want to talk further about. Okay, we are at section 17, somewhat of a natural stopping point within the agenda, or at least the charter itself. We can keep going, it's about 6 o'clock, and keep identifying issues, or we can delve into some of the already identified issues. Any preference among committee?
Madam Chair, I'd like to see us continue just, kind of crossing off stuff to get that out of the way.
Whittling
if we
things
can.
down?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Okay, section 17, law director and assistants.
So 16 was no or revisit?
It was a revisit.
Madam Chair.
Schwanger?
Yes, on 17, I'd like to hold that for further discussion at a later time concerning the law director being under the city manager, and also some clarification on assistant law director and anybody else that might fall under the law director's department.
Okay. Section 18, Department of Finance and Audits.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Schwanger?
Yeah, same with Section 18, Finance, regarding the finance director being under the guise of the city manager.
Section 19, Accounting Procedure. No anticipated changes there. Section 20, Assessments and Licenses. Happy with that job? Okay. No anticipated changes there. Section 21, Payment of Claims. No anticipated changes there. Section 22, Certification of Funds. Okay. Section 23, Money in the Fund. I could use a layman's interpretation of this one as well. Either Michelle or Stuart.
Or money in the fund?
Yes.
My layman terms of it is, it just regulates what you can include as money in the fund for when I do a certification. So like if it's a January and I'm certifying, $500,000 in the street fund, we may only have $400,000 in the street fund, but within the year, we will be above that $500,000 threshold.
Okay. That's somewhat what I wanted to confirm when I was reading this, that you can in fact anticipate future collection of funds when making decisions.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Seeing no anticipated changes there. Section 24, emergencies.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Zuloff.
I don't know if I should even introduce the idea of trying to clarify what the heck is an emergency, because we already know that we're passing legislation. Everybody does it, and probably for good reason, passing legislations under emergency authorization when, you know darn well it's not an emergency. It's just like nobody wants to talk about it anymore. Why waste the time? Let's move on, right? So, but in this particular case, I don't know. Does anybody, maybe the law director can guide us on, you know, what the legal meaning of emergency is?
Yeah, I don't know that I can help you there. There is a dictionary definition. I would interpret this charter section, because I've encountered this in both legislation and charters where I've worked before. For example, in the city of Cleveland, we had a water main break, which resulted in a 100-foot, 30-foot ditch in the middle of a street.
Yeah.
There was not enough time to set it out for bid. There was not enough time to get different quotes. That was a true emergency. That hole had to be filled up before people fell in it and died. That's an emergency. Under the city ordinance of Cleveland, an emergency in that situation, if a mayor, in that case they had a mayor, in that case they had a president of council, both agreed that it was an emergency, then they could, draw, I think there was a $2 million limit, but they could immediately expend funds to deal with that emergency. And then the emergency only lasts by ordinance, and this is something better covered by ordinance. That emergency lasted until the next council meeting, where council then had to either reject or approve of what they did. If they rejected it, though, the contractor would be covered under the emergency powers of the mayor and the president of council, so that at least that contractor who in good faith showed up on an hour's notice and filled in that hole so people wouldn't die, could be paid.
Yeah, it's like an emergency. I know it when I see it, right?
Yeah, no, it's hard to describe all the various things that
Right.
have happened in a city.
But absolutely no teeth to, stop someone from speciously declaring an emergency to do something nefarious. But then what would be they didn't break any law, but now you'd have to, you'd have the option of removing from office. I don't.
No, there are way more protections than that. The
Okay.
state auditor comes to us every year. In fact, I think we're.
State auditor might say, no, that's not an emergency. Okay, all right.
Madam Chair, also, I think in this provision, it has a checks and balance. You have to go through the purchasing agent and the head of the department to sign off on it before it's declared emergency. So it's just like not one person saying, wow, there's a problem or an emergency.
Similar to what Cleveland had. Two people had to get together to declare it.
Well, the most reassuring, that's a good point too, but the most reassuring is that I hadn't thought about the audit function and how that could, and would that then put the evildoer at risk of criminal proceedings then?
Of criminal proceedings, and they might owe the money themselves.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may. So this section is not used very often at all. Recently, I can tell you, basically the water plant or the sewer plant, if they have a mechanical failure of a pump or something that costs more than $10,000, is the reason we would do an emergency purchase for this. And this emergency is different than passing legislation as emergency. This purchase is an emergency. We had a commission meeting yesterday. Today, something goes wrong at one of our plants. We need a pump. It's $12,000. We don't have time to wait for commission to reconvene in another 2 weeks and then go out and get a part. We need a part or something immediately, it's an emergency. So we'll go out, they'll still typically get quotes, bids, if it's something we can get from multiple sources. They'll get those quotes, they'll go with the best quote, and then at the next meeting, we'll bring it back as an emergency to say, this came up, this is what happened, we need you now to ratify and approve the legislation. So there is still a checks and balance, and it does come in front of the commission.
Yeah, I see no need to discuss this further.
Sounds like we are comfortable with both the flexibility and checks and balances as written. Section 25, expenditures.
Madam Chair, I have some concerns regarding the competitive quotation and the formal competitive bidding limitations, as Ohio Revised Code allows for up to $75,000 for competitive bidding. I have concerns that these numbers may cause some inefficiency in people being able to complete work in a timely and cost-saving basis.
Madam Chair, I'd also like to review this section.
Okay. That's probably all I need to hear. Very good. Revisit section 25.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
This is one of the topics that I wanted Michelle to be here for,
Oh.
so if we can let her address that while she's here, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I figured we'd come back and have a whole nother discussion on this one because I didn't bring a lot of information with me, but I will say that yes, the threshold was $75,000 for purchases by ORC, so per the Ohio Revised Code in 2024, with the provision that that increases by 3% every year. So this year it would be $77,250, I believe, for 2025. The city is at that $10,000 threshold. So obviously there's a great difference. Just last night, I know on the commission meeting, we had a pump for irrigation that was $15,000. That there is a lot of work behind the scenes that go in for a $15,000 part. So I definitely agree this is something we'd love to see changed. I know it's been brought up previously, but if we can come up with a number that people are comfortable with, and like we said before, anything above $10,000 would be an improvement. But with the cost and inflation of goods, we used to be able to buy a used car for the Detective Bureau and not bring it to commission. But now we can't even buy a used car without it coming to commission and saying, hey, we're buying a different car for our Detective Bureau and things like that. So there's a lot of times that it comes very beneficial for the city and efficiency-wise for the city if we could look at increasing that limit from $10,000.
Yeah, and to expound on that, by the way, the used car was supposed to be an undercover car, and all the bad guys in the world get to see it on our commission agenda.
It's a good example.
Yeah, no, that was a good example. Yeah, and by the way, this is an example of something I don't think is best addressed in a charter. I think this is best addressed by legislation. Where I worked before in Beechwood, it was 15,000, but then they increased it to 25,000, and they did that through their city council and mayor, and that, again, a public process, people got to talk about it. But as the world changes around us, as inflation hit us, it's extraordinarily difficult to change a charter, and we only review it every 5 years.
Ms. Chairman, I think one of the barriers, I think this has been discussed before in different contexts, maybe informally, and part of it is trust. Part of it is, sometimes there's cynical mistrust of the people that have to make these decisions. This might be a moment when we don't have as much of a problem. I don't know. Maybe this is the moment. If we have a benchmark at the state that says 75,000 and it's adjusted, I don't know if we couldn't ensconce that. And I'm not even proposing it, but what if we ensconce it here or even some fraction thereof? Well, maybe we think that's twice as much as it should be. Maybe it should be half of whatever the state says. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, if we didn't have a charter at all, right now it'd be 77,250.
Right. So it seems like kind of draconian to reduce it by, almost 1/8 or less, a little more than 1/8 of what the state limit is. Seems like it begs review.
Sarita, what is the annual operating budget of the city? What will we spend in a year?
It depends a lot on grants, but we're $90 million a year, so $10,000.
That as a percentage does it
Yeah.
for me. Okay, so an item to revisit. Anything else from the team? Okay, very good. Section 26, sinking fund trustees.
That doesn't exist.
Okay. It's a goner.
It's a goner.
Section 27, civil service.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Schwanger.
I'd like to see this further discussed at a later meeting. I know I talked to the police chief a little bit yesterday, and I think he wants to come in and talk to us
Yeah,
on 27.
he's scheduled to come at the next meeting,
Okay,
talk to you.
okay.
But the more I think we're going through the process right now and just identifying, so I don't necessarily think that maybe we should have him there and come back whenever you guys are going to talk about it in a formal meeting so that it can be addressed. Because eventually, you're going to talk about it again. This is just identifying them. I'm fine with him coming in and doing it at the next meeting, but then you're going to have another conversation, and then I have to bring him in again for another conversation. So however you want to do it is fine.
Sure.
Yeah, and I would add, this has turned into a real bottleneck for the city. As we try to compete for policemen with other cities who exercise their full home rule powers, they can act faster, they can make their list last longer, and we need that same flexibility.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I look at this and there's a lot of nitty-gritty detail here that I think our law director might say this is detail that belongs in legislation, not in the charter, giving us more flexibility to adapt. I bet this could be pared down to the
I've seen it pared down to the city intends to operate with its full home rule powers with regard to civil service. Now, that doesn't mean it's wide open. That means that now we have a civil service commission. They will set rules. We have a city commission that will approve those rules. So we will have rules, and they will be public rules, and everybody gets to comment on them. But to put it into a charter where it really cannot be changed just handicaps us.
Right, and if the member of the public says, what are we doing this for? It's not open to discussion, we can't do anything about it, it's in the charter, too bad. So this at least opens it up if the public says, holy cow, what's wrong here? We can at least ask the city commission to look at it and do something about it.
So we will mark that. Oh, Mr. Miller?
Yes, I'm glad we're going to mark it, because then my point won't be so stupid. Is it a department or a division? They're used sort of interchangeably, but they don't mean the same thing in general context. Often, a department might have numerous divisions within it, or something like that, but the number of things that I've read just in the first sections that have two names for the same thing, city manager, president of commission, city solicitor, finance director.
Yes.
I mean, and I don't think all this stuff needs to go to the ballot to simplify and streamline some of that, but if we're opening it up anyway, maybe that's the opportunity to get down to one name that means one thing.
Mr. Schwann?
Is there a section in the Ohio Revised Code that speaks of municipal civil service that we can copy after that is simpler?
There is, Ohio Revised Code deals extensively with civil service. If we were not a charter city and just a regular city, we would be following those civil service rules. And actually, some of those civil service rules have more flexibility than our charter. Ohio does have an overlay. We are allowed to deviate from that a little bit under our own home rule authority.
Is that something we should look at then? to revise?
Yes, I believe that this belongs in civil service rules and in legislation that the city adopts.
Okay.
So when we revisit this item, if we have questions or examples, specific things that we'd like brought for our education, we can kind of assemble that in advance as well, so that they can
Yeah,
be
no, I think the
prepared.
police chief wants to fill your ears with the trouble we're having finding policemen.
Good. Section 28, other boards and departments. Mr. Schwanger?
I'm running out of air here. I'd like to revisit this if we can at a future date. Some of the concerns I'm hearing out in the community is that we have members on some boards that have been on the board for 25 years. We have some boards that require 4-year terms, some 3-year terms. Some boards don't require that the board be a resident of the city of Sandusky. There's a number of boards that are silent on whether or not you have to be a resident of Sandusky. And in the conversations that I've had, during commission meetings and other meetings, is that a lot of Sandusky folks think that it's imperative that if a committee is making decisions or advising the city manager or departments, that they should actually live in the city in which they're making those recommendations. So I would like to discuss that further. I'm not going to talk about it anymore today, but, bring that up in the future if we can.
Okay.
And that would be section 28 and 29, probably more 29 than it is 28. My apologies.
Regarding section 28, Mr. Hastings' line that the city commission shall have authority to provide an officer whose duty it shall be to defend and furnish legal advice.
Yes. That's usually my department, but
Okay,
it doesn't have to be.
okay.
It's hard to describe all the eventualities that there might be, but
That's, yeah, it seemed an interesting line when there's a whole section about
yeah, I see that.
legal
Yeah,
procedures.
that is an interesting line. All I can say is there are very rare times when a board becomes at odds with other members of the city, and
Okay,
it might pose a legal conflict.
understood. Okay, so marking sections 28 and 29 as those to revisit. Section 30, salaries and bonds. No change anticipated there. Section 31, city manager appointment.
Madam Chair,
No, go ahead.
I had a question as to, did you say it was all right for me?
Yes, please.
Okay. I had a question as to whether, once the person is appointed, they don't have to be a resident of the city, but the amount of time afterwards that they should become a resident, or do they ever have to become a resident?
Does not seem to be addressed.
I could
Mr. Zavala?
maybe, to the best of my recollection, a lot of these questions have been taken, on case by case. I know that if you're talking about like a board appointment, Landmark Commission, which was created in the last, 10 years or so, looked for some very specific skills and knowledge. So it didn't require that all of the members be residents. I think it'd be awful generous if somebody was willing to serve on a board at no pay and lend their expertise in certain circumstances. Other cases, by golly, you should be a resident in most cases. So I think there can be judicious exceptions to the residency requirement, but generally it's a good idea.
Ms. Rizzo, are you referring to our board's section 29, or are you referring to the city manager?
Well, what was, I'm sorry, what was the comment? Maybe I misunderstood.
I think we agree that we'd like to at least discuss the advisory boards and perhaps whether residency is a requirement for serving. We've moved on to section 31, which
Yeah.
I think your
City
point, Ms.
manager.
Wilson, is just referring to the city manager.
Okay, but we've
that
already
they need to
always
be
taken it
resident.
case by case. I guess, are we suggesting that, are we raising the question of how long the city manager appointee be allowed to live outside the city before, or?
Yes, before becoming a resident of the city.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that, should that maybe be subject to contract or something, or subject to negotiation?
I have to interject here, because the Ohio legislature passed a law,
Yeah.
in, I forget the exact year, but the Ohio Supreme Court ruled in 2010 that all law overrules all city charters, overrules all.
You can no longer have a residency.
Yeah, it's an
requirement.
Article 2, Section 34 argument that the Ohio legislature can take away home rule when it benefits employees, is a very simple way of saying it. And since the city manager is not an elected mayor, you can make an elected mayor live in the city, but you cannot make an employee of the city live in the city. That's what the Ohio Supreme Court said in 2010.
Oh. What about an appointed
Well, they're appointed.
board member?
They don't have to live in the city.
Because we did change, and that's the only reason I was bringing up, because I know of a specific example.
Employees, they're not paid by us. so
Right.
Yeah.
But we said that Landmark Commission, we changed the ordinance to up the ante and say, well, we want you to be
Yeah, no, and
a
to
resident.
briefly mention on that advisory boards, I know we're having trouble filling them right now. And, not everybody wants to work for free for the city on an advisory board. But as far as employees go, we cannot make them live in the city.
So for section 31, are there any further concerns with the way it's currently written, understanding that
Yeah,
I would hope a good
Right. So-
valiant effort would live in the
Right,
city,
but-
but we can't enforce that.
Yeah.
But if I could clarify, is this,
Mr. Zulhoff, let me pass over to Mr. Hill
I'm
first and
just,
come back.
I'm just seeking a quick clarification of what the law director said, and then I'll shut up. How's that?
Okay.
All right. So are you saying this was changed to comply with the Supreme Court decision?
No, I don't. If you look further in our charter, we have a provision that says all employees of the city must live in the city. That's
So-
still in our charter.
Well, let's fix it.
It's totally unenforceable.
Yeah.
Ohio Supreme Court and the Ohio legislature have overruled.
Thanks for that clarification.
It's amazing that doesn't have to automatically be redacted, but sure.
Yeah.
Mr.
I
Hill?
mean, we could fix that, but
To my understanding, where it says the city commissioner shall appoint a city manager, when you look at every other position that the city manager oversees, such as the police department, the fire department, they are all required to have some type of, like 12 years of service, being 10 years of service for the firefighter, and to be a certain rank before they can actually even apply for that particular position. Even city commissioners basically have to be within the city. If you do your research, most city managers throughout the United States of America, they hold a certain degree. They hold a certain skill, like they come from the planning department. They come from, I think it was like 59% actually hold a master's degree. They come from being previous assistant city managers, which I believe, Mr. Orzak, you were assistant at one time, correct? There is nothing in there And to me, for future references, when and if Mr. Orszag does retire, for us to get a quality person, I just don't see how someone that, to me, doesn't have the skill set or the educational set should be overseeing individuals that's not. He's over people that's overeducated and overqualified. And if they don't have the skill set in certain areas, such as accounting, such as people management, which he does, it can eventually affect us in the long run. And I think that has caused a lot of issues that I'm hearing from our citizens, from my experience in management over the years, that we're having issues with things such as that. But I think there should be something within there that we are looking for the most qualified person.
Aren't qualifications objective? I mean, I would say there's several successful people who have run and grown businesses who might not have formal education or what you call a skill set that would be plenty capable of running our city.
May I say? Yes, you're sitting next to one. Okay, very much so, but there are times. I didn't finish college. My brother has a master's degree. He is actually in corporate America. He's worked for Home Depot, Kmart, corporate level. He actually right now works for Tyson's. And there are plenty of times, like yesterday, I had to call him for a mathematical thing. So there are a lot of times that without me having certain skill sets that I did not finish college and did not achieve, I have to reach out to my brother for certain other things. Even within the other previous, like you stated, my previous two other employers, McDonald's and Walmart, they would actually allow you to go so far. Then when you went so far, they would recommend that you at least get an associate's degree. So I feel that in the future, for us to get the best qualified person, and if not, I don't see how we're asking for the police chief to have a certain skill set and certain qualifications. The fire department have certain skill set and certain qualifications. Even the commissioners have to be here for a certain period of time. I don't see why we're not asking the same thing for the person who's actually overseeing all of our departments.
So I'm hearing interest in revisiting this for further discussion. I will say that I would just point out that the way that it's written, I think we're implying that the city commission develops a benchmark that would hopefully include appropriate background and education. And we are discussing whether we're changing the specificity that you find around police chief and fire chief in the current write-up. So should be an interesting discussion for all three and how particular we want to be in the charter about qualifications.
Can I make a suggestion?
Mr. Schwab?
So when we hire a city manager and they go out for interested candidates, we do have a written job description which includes what qualifications they have to have.
Yes, that is something we normally do.
Okay.
You're absolutely right,
Can you-
Mr. Schwanger.
Can you get that to us for for whenever we discuss this?
Yeah, we can find what we sent out last time. I'm assuming we did. I wasn't here,
Okay.
but I'm assuming we did do something. But I will, again, this is something that I don't think belongs in a charter. I think this is something the city commission should develop. They are the legislative authority here. And an example comes to my mind is if we're looking for a city manager, and no offense to our current one, but if Jim Tressel said, I'm available, I would think that'd be a great choice.
Well, okay, so in my experience, and I've seen this because in the past, I've done a public information request on the qualifications and job description on different employees of the city. And I've seen where in the past, if we lose a person in this department, a department head, that sometimes the job description is rewritten to sometimes maybe favor somebody that they would like to have as the new department head. And then when they lose that department head, then the job description is changed again. So it needs to be, and again, like you said, this is something that the city commission needs to address, that the job description should not change to a lesser, it should maybe change to a more qualified, list of qualifications. And I'd be interested to see the paperwork for not just Mr. Orzak, but the last city manager and the city manager before that, to see if that job description or qualifications has changed.
Well, yeah, make a public records request if
Okay.
we still have those records.
Okay.
All those records have a time period where they.
And I'm not just picking on the city manager, I'm saying any.
Yeah, no, we always respond to public records requests.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I move to adjourn.
It is 6:30.
It is 6:30.
I'll second that. I'll second that.
Okay, all right, so we are leaving off at item 32. At our next meeting, we will continue our effort of identifying non-discussion items. Made it through 30, I think a minimum of 20, so if you can be prepared to discuss sections. Finish administrative officers and departments. Be prepared to discuss improvements in contracts. And, I mean, I would be prepared for elections and appropriations just to keep us moving. And the sooner we identify non-discussion items, the longer time we have for discussion.
Can you
provide
Number 32,
Yes.
and how long do you want to go to? How far?
We'd like to be prepared through item 54. Any other items of old business?
We're adjourned.